and welcome to Fortel's latest Lunch and Learn session, which is about neurodiversity in the built environment for Autism Pride Day. Today we have lots of great panelists who are going to introduce themselves. I'm Sharon Slinger from Constructing Rainbows. I'm Fortel's Diversity and Inclusion Partner. I'm sure H will tell you a bit more about Fortel when he comes on. And I think without further ado, we'll get into introductions. So H, do you want to go first?
Yeah, my name's Hardeep Sanghera. I am Fortel's Health and Safety Manager, been with the company 22 years this year, I think it is. So we're part of the Labour Supply Agency, working on the construction industry.
Super, thanks, H. Amanda, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name's Amanda White and I'm Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at RES, one of our renewable energy companies. And I previously have a background in people and culture. I am diagnosed ADHD combined type. So I'm here to learn more about people with ADHD in the workplace and share my stories as well.
Thanks, Amanda. Vanessa?
Hi, I'm Vanessa Curtis. I am a Senior Director at CBRE and founder and chair of Ability RE, which is a non-profit aimed at driving awareness and opportunities within real estate and the built environment for people with disability, neurodiversity, long-term health conditions, and mental ill health. I have ADHD as well, and I'm the proud owner of 2 children who are neurodiverse.
Super, thanks, Vanessa. And finally, Jean.
Hi, Jean Hewitt. I'm with Buro Happold as an inclusive design specialist. I've specialised in this for over 20 years. And I'm also the technical author of the PAS 6463, Design for the Mind, Neurodiversity and the Built Environment.
Thanks, Jean. Right, so should we crack on with some questions? The first one I've got is, in a recent RICS Modus edition, they posed the question, does the built environment ignore neurodiversity? What do you think about that? Should we start with Vanessa?
Oh, yes, do, because I've got lots to say on this one. So I would say, sadly, in the majority of cases, yes, it does. There's obviously in recent years been a huge increase in the awareness and the conversations around neurodiversity. There's been some fantastic research around the workplace environment and the challenges that it can present to people who are neurodiverse. And obviously we have the incredible PAS standard now, but I think there's still a huge amount of work to be done. I think for the last 20 plus years, real estate and the built environment have been focusing on workplace in terms of efficiency, but this was the efficiency around office costs and utilization metrics, not efficiency of human performance. And I think the trends kind of went open plan, hot desking, increased hoteling ratios, smaller desks, lower allowance of space, all of those things. But the trend was focused on kind of allowing organizations to make the cost saves and probably, and reducing their footprint and so nothing was really added back in terms of other spaces for work. So I think the approach to the design of the office was around standardization. It was around promotion of an organizational brand, depersonalization of spaces. And I think thoughts of sort of inclusion and accessibility relating to design were basically sticking a ramp at the front of the building and saying, oh, well, people can get in and we're lovely and friendly. And unfortunately, it's going to take quite a lot of time to unpick some of that embedded thinking, even though we're having these conversations around neurodiversity now and organizations are more aware. I think they're kind of embedding things like policies and procedures, which is great, but I think it's going to take a lot longer before people start designing from concept all the way through, rather than kind of getting to when they've done the fit out and going, oh, maybe we should stick in an extra noise baffler or a potted plant. But hopefully we'll just need to keep making noise about it.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. I think I agree with that. H, have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, I do agree with exactly what Vanessa just said, really, and especially in the construction industry, it's still not really out there. You speak to any of the workforces about it, and they want to have no idea. They don't want to talk about it. As much as we've gone brilliantly with other issues, for example, like mental health, we still do not talk about other issues on things like this. So I do really think we need to bring this more out as well out there, so where people do feel comfortable about talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's it. There's the built environment, isn't there? And then there's the construction process as well, and getting people talking about it more on construction sites, because often that doesn't happen. Jean, I'd like you to answer that, but I've got a separate question for you as well. So built environment professionals are in a unique position to affect real positive change for neurodivergent people on their internal and external environments. What kind of changes can we make, and how do we make it a core part of the design process?
So when we looked at the PAS standards, we did incorporate every REBA stage, and we had some great input by Jane Simpson, who was representing REBA, on how you could take the type of interventions that we want for neurodiversity and overlay that at every stage of a project. I think, just going back to the previous question, one of the things for me was very important to get the management of the built environment and people's attitudes and awareness into the PAS. And to an extent, we've done that, but it is by and large around more about the design, unfortunately. But we are hoping from that will be a catalyst to get more done. But I think looking at your second question, going back to that REBA, that's a good place to start. But I also think that more awareness among the whole architectural and design profession is essential. They seem to be taking it up quite well so far. And I think it's not as difficult a thing to build in at any stage in a project. So, for example, a lot of the stressors can be around noise and light, for example. Those are things that can be improved when you change your lighting systems and your finishes, and they can come at any time in a project. So, you know, if you've got an existing building and you're trying to change it, you can still change those elements. Whereas for physical access, for example, a lift shaft is very difficult to do retrospectively. So I think there are lots of opportunities here that designers can take up at any time in an existing building too.
Jean, you're an inclusive design consultant, aren't you? Are there plenty of them out there to if suddenly the industry picks it up? Are there plenty of you out there? Obviously, no one as good as you do. But, yeah.
I'm the technical author for the PAS, but I worked with a steering group of real experts. They both in terms of their professional backgrounds, and many of them had lived experience as well, or familiar experience, so family members, and that was invaluable. So there are lots of people out there who know about neurodiversity. Obviously, I know the PAS deeply, but there are lots of spin-offs coming as well. So I am seeing pockets of research going in all directions from the PAS, which is always meant to be a kind of toe in the water that would kickstart things a bit. One of the things I did want to mention, I think, was that historically we didn't address many of the issues because we felt that the spectrum of need was so vastly different across, people would say, oh, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So how do you design for that? But what you need to look at, and what we try to do with the PAS, is to look at the common things that go wrong and the common stressors, the very worst ones, and try and tackle it that way. And also to build in that flexibility. So I think it's an easy thing for any designer to grasp that you've got to have different types of spaces for different types of people, and the same people on different days doing the different tasks even. Does that make sense? I think COVID's actually helped this because we've gone to hybrid working, and that that allows more hot desking and flexibility, and they've understood some people come to the office to collaborate and some people come to get their head down and do a bit of quiet report writing. So we have to have those different spaces.
Yeah, and we are seeing that more in offices these days, aren't we? That kind of different workspaces for different people. And you touched on lived experiences actually, and I guess that's what's really important across all diversity and inclusion in the built environment. One of the reasons that we want people with lived experiences taking up roles in this industry is to bring in that experience, so that we can, include it in our designs and in our construction sites and everything. So, that's why we're all here today, I think, and doing all of the great stuff that we're doing is to encourage more diverse people into the industry. Amanda, as well as the built environment, we know that workplaces are set up for neurotypical people. How can we address processes that create barriers for neurodivergent people?
Again, I've got quite a lot I could say about the subject. I think we have to create that safe space, that psychological safety, where people feel comfortable to ask for any accommodations they might need, and that's right from the moment they apply for a role, right until actually throughout the whole talent life cycle. I think when you've got that safety and people feel free or comfortable or safe to say, look, I need an accommodation here, there, or actually what I've heard, we should now refer them as productivity enhancers instead of adjustments or accommodations. So I think when you are designing a role and then you advertise the role, it's looking at that language within the job description and the job advert. People have different cognitive approaches, and the more information you put into a job advert, it's just barrier. I think engaging with people within your organization and really taking in their perspectives on their experience at the interview stage, their experience of onboarding, going out and having that range of experience is really useful. And I would say one of the things we're looking at the minute is testing. So sometimes in our technical roles, we have a test we give to candidates. And what we actually found from our engagement survey is someone said he was an internal candidate and the whole process was horrendous because he is dyslexic. There was a timer on the test, and he actually, by the time he read the question and understood it, the timer was gone. And it's even things like the psychometric testing as well. These tests are designed, to put it quite frankly, cookie cutter type employees. And if we are talking about inclusion and diversity and we want to have different ranges of perspective, then why do we still recruit the same way? Innovate our interview process. If someone needs a bit of preparation like they do for meetings when you give them an agenda, why wouldn't you prepare a candidate for interview along the same lines instead of expecting them to turn up? If people get really intimidated by panel interviews, looking at all the different sets of eyes, take them on a walk and ask them the same questions. Just prepare to innovate and be flexible, instead of having outdated ideas of what a recruitment process should look like. So I have got more to say across the whole talent life cycle, but I'll leave it there.
I think you're right. I think the way that we hire people has been the same for so long, and no one has really been modernizing it until fairly recently. So it is definitely time for a change. Vanessa, have you got any thoughts on this? I'm sure you have.
Hundreds and hundreds. You may have to shut me up and cut me off. So I think, firstly, I agree with everything Amanda said, but I think the biggest, maybe not the biggest, but the first hurdle that you have to address is actually within any organization, there is always a fear or a reluctance to change something, particularly something that's been in place for a long time and is perceived by a lot of people to have served its purpose very well. And there is a reluctance to accept that even someone contributing their lived experience of said process, I think people don't like to change. I think they go with the, if it ain't broke, don't you fix it. But unfortunately, it is broken. They're just not aware of it. So I think that's the first problem. And then I think those barriers that we're talking about, they do impact, as Amanda said, every single stage of the whole employee life cycle. And it starts right off from, how we're writing job descriptions and where we're advertising those jobs. And I think, a lot of organizations have those standard boilerplate job templates, where they ask for everyone and their dog to be basically a master of absolutely everything. Does that junior admin role need a degree? No, not really. Does that research assistant or that analyst role actually need to be an outgoing people person and a great team player? No, we're just going with that, as you've said, that misguided perception of the perfect all-round employee. And actually, we're probably missing out on great talent when we try to recruit for that. And then that goes obviously through into the recruitment process itself. We're going through interviews where we're judging people on whether we seem to have an affinity for them, whether we think there would be a cultural fit, which is laughable, because if you actually want to diversify your organization, if you're recruiting for a cultural fit, you're just basically going to exclude everyone who doesn't fit that mold that's there already. And what we actually need to look at is skills-based assessments. Can this person do this role? And that's a hard change to get people to accept. And it's particularly hiring managers, the middle management level, they want to look somebody in the eye and have a chat with them and feel, that they can work with that person. And without realizing it, they may be ruling out someone who does not want to have that same level of, say, eye contact, or, actually is more comfortable working in a quieter environment or anything like that. And then that goes right through to when they're in the position. How are we identifying, top talent? How are we choosing those people who go on the fast track programs? How are we identifying people for sort of promotion rounds? And again, I think it tends to go on, this person is always in the office. They're choosing the desk next to their line manager. They're telling everyone how busy and hardworking they are. They're making the social connections. And it's not necessarily based on the output of the individual and what they are physically bringing value-wise to the organization. It's much more of a feelings-based approach. And again, that can go against people. But it does mean that we're undervaluing talent and possibly promoting people who are just very good at talking about their job. Not that I'm cynical at all. And even things like adjustments, you've got to have the policy in place, but you also, a lot of the policies tend to put the onus on the employee to come forward to say what they need. Quite often people don't know what they need or what is out there that could support them. And also I think adjustment policies tend to, well, a lot of the time they actually require a diagnosis, and quite a lot of neurodivergent people don't actually have a diagnosis. As we know, the waiting lists in this country are ridiculous. So I think we need to move away from kind of, oh, you're dyslexic, here is our adjustment package for someone who is dyslexic, to, we support everyone in our workplace to succeed. And then that way, I think we will get out of that kind of thing. But there's just so much. And I think to say it's really sad, but I do think it's also factors in kind of at the end of the employee life cycle, be that, exit interviews or people leaving the business or performance improvement approaches, or, you know, if there are redundancies, how people are selected for redundancy. And it makes me really sad. So I think we just need to change the whole thing about how we evaluate or what we think success is. And it needs to be much more skills based and role based than feeling based.
Yeah, and I'd actually just like to add to that a point about typical adjustments policies. They tend to have a cost centre attached to them. That in itself is a barrier. Which department or business unit is paying for this adjustment? So there is a stigma attached that adjustments mean, like we said earlier, you know, an expensive accommodation. And it quite often isn't. It's just someone doesn't suit hot desking, let them have a fixed desk. So I think taking a barrier actually away from the policy is actually saying the business will pay for it. The business, not, you know, this department, the finance team, the legal team, but the business. And that should take away that cost bearing bias as well.
Yeah, I think as a QS by background, I'm always interested in cost, but I'm also interested in value. And I think, you know, the value that you get out of it is much greater than the cost. So I think, yeah, and also interesting, Vanessa, what you said. There is a certain type of person that makes it to the top in our industry, yeah, we just need to try and break that mold. One for you, H. Why do you think people with neurodivergent traits hide them on construction sites?
God, the construction industry, as we know, is male dominated. We are counted as the strong men, and we don't like talking about it, and it's a lot to do. I mean, I suffer from dyslexia, and I've never really brought it up in a conversation. I've worked in construction industries for over 20 odd years, worked out on sites, started as a labourer and worked my way up to be a foreman. And I never told anyone. The only thing I would do is if my works manager said, we need that doing, we'll go out and get it done. And I question myself and I look over it and I thought, did he say this? And I kept on going backwards and forward to him and asking because it just would not register in my head. And he realized it. And this was going back, 18 odd years ago. And he used to say to me, he goes, right, you come in a bit earlier and we'll walk the site instead. And that way I could understand it. But at that time, I didn't even know I had dyslexia. So to me, I go, all right, Sam, an extra hour on my paycheck every day. That's how I saw it. So we'll walk the site. He goes, right, we can get team A to do this, team B, team C, and blah, blah, blah. And it registered then. I have to physically see it. I can't, if someone just tells me something, even now up to today, you know, I could go into a safety meeting and we'll talk about it. And some of it will just go straight over my head. It would not register. And then I've got to speak to another safety person who's in that same meeting. But what do they really want us to do? Do they really need it to? They'll break it down for me. We don't, and this is it. In the construction industry, we do not talk about it. And like I said, I never spoke about it because I always thought if I tell everyone this, they're going to question my ability of doing my job. Can he do it? How's he got that position and things like that? So I kept it quiet. And it ain't until about 3 years ago that I really started telling people, oh, you're going to have to break it down, slow it down, explain to me again. Yeah, I suffer from dyslexia. And now in the management side, in the office side, people understand that. They respect that, you know, no, that's not a problem, H. We'll talk about it afterwards and we'll get it sorted. But people working physically, the blue collar on site, other people might take it as banter. They might say it as a joke to them. They might say something. To them, it might be a joke, but that person who's taking it, who they're mentioning it to, they could take it. They take it personally. I would have done. So I think that's one of the reasons why we don't really like to talk about it on site. Office wise, yes, it is getting much better, but for the blue collar, they don't like talking about it because they're just scared of what outcome might come out of it, really.
Yeah, and I think it's good is that you're starting to tell your story now, and people look up to you, and it's really important kind of having that role models, and actually hopefully people on site will watch this, and perhaps listen to your story and feel the same. I know when I've been doing my LGBT plus trainings for Fortel on site, and there's been really positive feedback, and perhaps we need to be getting out more on sites and doing stuff around neurodiversity as well. Vanessa, you've got your hand up, I see.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really I identify with some of those challenges, even though I have ADHD, first of all. And what I wanted to say was a point that I failed miserably to make when it came to adjustments. So what you were saying about that boss who was supportive and just said, right, we're going to walk the site, that is an example to me of a really simple adjustment. He probably didn't even think it was an adjustment that, actually would probably benefit everyone. And that was one thing that I wanted to say about adjustments, is when it comes to adjustments for neurodiverse people, they tend to be a lot of the time things that are really easy to do that actually everyone finds helpful. And they benefit everyone in the organization, not just that one person. So that could be simple things like giving, if you're in a meeting and you'll give lots of information, following it up with an email with some step-by-steps so people can refer back to it. Easy things like that. Or, making sure that there is a visual aspect as well, because my mind works in a very visual way as well. There are really easy things that people can do that are completely free and actually help everyone in an organization, like, issuing an agenda beforehand so everyone knows what to expect, issuing the minutes afterwards so people can refer back to them. Just really simple stuff that people don't think about that actually benefits everyone, not just your neurodivergent employee. So I think that was an amazing example. I just wanted to come in and say thank you for sharing that one.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I'm still on mute.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, it is brilliant. Even like you just mentioned, get the minutes after a meeting. Sometimes we do get them, but what I've started doing in the last year or so is, after we finish a meeting, is say, "Oh, can you email us the minutes or the slides or anything?" It's just so that I can, in my own time, in my own relaxation, in my own little world, I can go over them and go, "Oh, right, I've got to do that, have I? Right, okay, that's what they want us to do." And it's just like what you mentioned earlier, Sharon. It's about speaking up about it. Fortel started doing the South Asian mental health as part of our Make It Stick campaign, and I've suffered from mental health for a few years now, and I'm a mental health first aider. And so when I go out and start talking about mental health, my own mental health issues to the workforce, some of them I've worked with on site for many, many years and everything like that. And they'll come up to me at the end and go, "You never told me that you had this, you suffered with this, you tried to commit suicide," or things like that. I go, "Well, no, because I kept it all quiet." And for me to get that you lot to the other people, the workforce, to open up, the only way I can do that is by talking about my own mental health issues or my own dyslexia and things. That goes a long way, because they feel more comfortable about talking about it then. And it has always come up now in my mental health sessions that I do on sites, that you speaking up about it has helped me, because now I feel comfortable about speaking up. I think we did one with it just before I went away on holiday. We did a mental health session, and on a HS2 site up in the Midlands, and I got a feedback form from the clients, and it's what somebody else put in. Having these mental health sessions, I think it said, was absolutely brilliant, because the person who carried it out was talking about his own mental health issues, what helped it easier for everyone else to open up and discuss it themselves about their own issues as well. So it is really great that we could speak up about it. And if we don't speak up about it, we're just going to be banging our heads against the wall for the next so many years.
Yeah, and I think, the more that people can talk about it, the more that they're kind of releasing and sharing their feelings, the better, isn't it?
Yes.
Just on that topic about people hiding on construction sites, Vanessa and Amanda, you've obviously got lived experience. Have you ever been in a position, I'm adding this question in, sorry. Have you ever been in a position where you've felt like you need to hide at work?
Yeah. Yeah, most of my life. Again, I only got my ADHD diagnosis a few years back after my son was diagnosed, but I think it definitely made some things, like it was like a light bulb going on. It was like, oh yeah, that's why I've always struggled with X, Y, Z, whatever it was. And I think the problem is, I do think it's right that we need those role models, that we need those people who are brave enough to speak out, and I do. But you can also, unfortunately, be in a position where that can backfire on you as an individual. And I also have experienced that, because people do make assumptions, and there is still a big stigma. And I've heard, obviously, in my role, a lot of people do talk to me within the industry, and people do kind of say, oh, this has happened, and they have that negative personal experience where they've said something once, and the response from the line manager has been not great, or their team, and then I think there's almost a reluctance then to stick their head above a parapet again. And yeah, I have experienced that, and it's really uncomfortable, especially if you're in an organization where you thought you were valued, and then something else happens, and that is hard, I think, for any person.
Yeah, I think for me, growing up, there wasn't a mandate for girls being tested. And it was always, the ADHD focus was always on boys, the hyperactive boys. And so being diagnosed later, and also my son, I've got a son and daughter, and my son also has combined type ADHD. I find the most exhausting thing is the years and years and years, and I've had more years than you, Vanessa, is those years of masking, okay? And we talk about code switching, and a lot of, we were talking about perhaps waste, etc. We might talk about code switching. And I can tell you that the lack of awareness in education and comments like, oh, everybody's a bit ADHD, aren't they? These comments are incredibly painful. You spend your time masking to fit other people's, what you think they are looking for in a colleague or a friend. And it's exhausting. And then sometimes you let it slip, and I can be myself, which is very direct. And Sharon will tell you this. I can just be very direct, but hopefully very respectful. But I don't bluff. And then when that happens, and it's like, well, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? And it's like, oh, okay, so I'll just slip back into what you want me to be. Okay, if you want me to be fluffy, I'll be fluffy, and soften things. So I think it's the masking element is incredibly hard, and it's an emotional burden. It brings with it a lot of feelings of shame, not being good enough, and you're incredibly, I think, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone else, but highly sensitive as well. So yeah, so it does come into every aspect, and it's, if I had the choice to live with it or not live with it, it would definitely to not be living with it.
I just need to jump in there and say, yes, 100%. I feel everything that you have just said. Masking, trying to be that acceptable person throughout your entire business career, being told that you need to be softer as soon as you let your actual opinions come through, in a high pressure environment, which our industry is, it's really hard. And then, if you have that whole day in front of a client or something where you almost feel like you're on your best behavior and you have to put your little mask on, I assume that you're the same. You can kind of go home and from an emotional and mental perspective, you feel like you've been steamrolled. It's fatiguing, extremely fatiguing. And you're right, you don't feel like you're accepted for you. And it's hard. It's really hard.
It's ironic because we do talk about diversity and inclusion and be in a safe space to bring your best self to work. And then, is that what's really happening? Because I still feel that, I don't fit into the status quo of what I should be. So yeah.
I think when people, or some people, talk about diversity inclusion, what they mean is we're happy to have anyone of any gender, race, ethnicity, neurotypical, atypical type standard, as long as you think, talk, feel, act like us. And the problem with neurodiversity is it is not visible. And people think that you, even if you tell them, you say, oh, I've got ADHD, they go, okay, that's great. But then as soon as you don't communicate in the same style as them, that's not acceptable because they think that you still should, which is really hard. It's really hard.
It's exhausting.
I have to say, I have learned a lot. We're working with Amanda. It is also, when you like, you try and adjust yourself as well to take recognition of it. One thing I
want to congratulate you, Sharon, for making it thus far. I mean, that's us been working together for, well done.
I mean, don't forget, I'm from the north, so we do direct. It's fine.
I've got a double whammy then. I've got the ADHD and the Geordie. That's no wonder I'm too direct.
Switching the topic a bit, Jean, you've been working on a menstrual and menopausal health British standard, which I think has been in the BBC News this last week also. What have you found around the connection between neurodivergence and menopause?
It's interesting because I got involved with the standard because of for other reasons, but it very quickly came out that people with ADHD and autism can often experience, say, perimenopause in a very different way. So perhaps symptoms that they have learned to manage over time suddenly become an issue again because something is changing. And this kind of makes sense to me because I know that when there are hormonal changes in the body, it can affect your sensitivity to noise and light, and people can get migraines and so on. So it made it complete sense that if you get any hormonal triggers, it can make changes to the senses and the way we experience environments. And that's exactly what's been found out. It seems to be a growing amount of evidence, for example, that when you have those hormonal changes, you can get increased sensory sensitivity. So people are hypersensitive anyway, but have got used to managing that. It can go up to another level. Or maybe people that haven't had the sensory sensitivity where they experience noise, sound, touch more extremely will suddenly get that. So it becomes a new symptom you haven't dealt with before. It can affect executive functions. So we've heard about brain fog anyway with perimenopause, but and emotional regulation and behavior, mood swings and things like that, an effect on sleeping, but it can be more so exacerbated, if you like, if you have a neurodivergent trait. Some of them, particularly autism and ADHD, I think so far have been identified as having that. So yeah, that's been interesting. So it's the BS 30416 and it was published last week. I think the official launch is in July, but it's out there now and it's free. So people can download it and read it. And there's a lot in there about management. And I had a quick check this morning, actually, ahead of having this discussion to see how much we mention neurodiversity in there. And it's in there a lot. an awful lot. So everywhere where we mention disability or maternity or anything else, we're also mentioning neurodiversity. It's a significant factor.
It's really interesting, actually, because it's well recognised that women's medical issues haven't been as well researched as men's medical issues and the money put behind it. And so actually, you know, as Amanda touched on, ADHD wasn't really recognised as something that happened to girls and women, you know, and actually the connection then between the two and the stuff that's coming out now is it's fascinating, isn't it? And I think it'll be a game changer for a lot of people as we start to progress with, you know, how we support people through that. I mean, the menopause piece, I think Davina McCall changed the landscape in the UK with her documentary that she did. I know it opened our eyes in our all-female house to what was coming. And so actually making that connection as well with the neurodiversity piece, I think is really important. So I think that's really interesting.
I'm just hoping that it doesn't cause a lot of fear in people, because people can get quite anxious about the thought of the menopause now. So by raising awareness, I think the standard hopefully is trying to say, look, there's lots of things you can do. And some people have, you know, swim through a menopause as I did, really easy time. My daughter had a surgically induced menopause, very, very different experience and very aggressive. So everyone's different and not everyone is going to, so it won't affect everyone with ADHD or autism badly, but it might affect some. And I think employers also need to be aware of that.
Yeah, I think one of the takeaways we took from Davina was HRT isn't this evil thing. And actually, like, my lifestyle probably is affecting my my chances of getting cancer more than HRT would. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's really fascinating. So next question. So Amanda and Vanessa again. As parents of neurodivergent kids, do you think schools are giving them support that you didn't get when younger? And what are your hopes for the future with regards workplaces when they enter the working world? Amanda, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think definitely the world is set up for neurotypical children, and I can only speak with the Australian education system, but we have these tests that we do at year 3 and 5 and then in year 9, 7 and 9, and they're called NAPLAN tests, and they're very much based around that neurotypical approach. With my son now being in high school, and I have raised it and said, you know, what extra, how can we make sure that the teachers are aware? You know, he might miss things, he might not read a full question on an exam, you know, what can we do? And the response has been, we are so used to dealing with neurodiversity in our children that all of our teachers are all over it. And I said, well, how could that be possible? You know, it's a lot of kids. Believe me, we're all over it. So far, so good. He has made it a little bit extra tuition in maths, but that's okay. That's a hard subject. I can't do, you know, the questions that he's got. The only thing I would say is that I think by continuing to create safe spaces where we are able to be vulnerable and talk about, you know, our ADHD or dyslexia, etc., will really help build awareness through the organisation, through the hiring process. And also, I think the advocacy is a really important point. You know, if we continue to raise awareness, educate, and have that advocacy, you know, of the complexity of our different experiences, then I think that will help, hopefully, in the future, by the time my son is in the workforce, that it's a much more inclusive place for him.
Vanessa?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is the difference between the Australian education system and the British one, or if it's simply a case of how neurodivergent. My eldest has ADHD and autism. And on a good day, he's great, and you probably couldn't tell if he's in a happy mood, and if it's not a good day, he can be incredibly challenging. I love him to bits, but incredibly challenging. And I've had a lot of problems with the school. They are aware of his diagnosis. He has a education healthcare plan, which is supposed to get him extra support and make the school make those accommodations for him. But I think my worries circulate around the perceptions around behaviour, and I think the schools haven't quite got to grips with the fact that it's not just about making sure that they're keeping up with the academic standard for their age group. It's about understanding the differences in behaviour. So my son was excluded from school when he was 6. And what happened was that he got in trouble with his teacher, and she sent him to the headmistress. And obviously they all know that he has autism. And when the headmistress started telling him off, he started avoiding eye contact with her. And what he did when he feels uncomfortable is he starts to like laugh and mess about. So he tried to do that to break down the situation, and he laughed, and they excluded him for a week. He was 6. And this is the sort of thing that really concerns me, if I'm honest. The support that the school puts in place is just so they can do the maths, as you say, but it's their mental health that I'm really worried about, because there was a piece of research that said for every one sort of bad experience or negative feedback or a telling off that a neurotypical child will get, a neurodiverse child will probably get around 20. So if you think about the lifelong impact on mental health and self-esteem, and that's starting from the very earliest ages. I think my son was about 5 or 6 when he told me that he was stupid and that he couldn't do anything and that he didn't have any friends. And I'm going to be honest, that broke me. I cried for like a whole night, because children that age shouldn't be thinking that. They should be running around going, yay, life's great, and playing and enjoying themselves. And then when we got to kind of talking about medication for him, they told me this alarming statistic that children who have neurodiversity are more than 50% more likely to die by suicide when they're an adult than a neurotypical. And that, again, when you think about it, it is just that lifelong sort of repeated message that you're not doing what you should be doing, you're not doing what everyone else is doing, therefore you're not good enough, or you're not acceptable. And that is the thing that actually gives me the most concern right now. It really scares me, because both my boys, they're bubbly, they're enthusiastic, they're massively intelligent. They're hugely intelligent kids. And all I want for them is to be able to be happy, to have a fulfilling life, to be able to, achieve their potential, yes, but, to really live life. And what worries me about the education system and then the workplace afterwards is I know how hard it can be, and I know how unfair it can seem. And yeah, I think there's still a lot of work to do just in that aspect.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
Sorry, I really didn't want to bring the conversation down, but I think, yeah,
what
education
I was saying earlier is that feeling of shame is magnified. So when someone's feeling embarrassed if they've let someone down, I remember I was invited to someone's party, and like I didn't believe, I just was, yep, I've got it, and I didn't turn up, and I got messages saying we're waiting for you. And when you feel like you've let someone down, it is just, why didn't I put that in my calendar? And you just feel that the shame is 10 times worse.
Everyone else can do this, why can't I? Yeah.
And I assume that's what you two have felt when and actually you're probably in a good position to support your kids, aren't you, having been through it yourselves?
Yeah, in some ways, I think it's good that I can sort of say to Ben, that Mummy's doing all right, and she has ADHD as well. But at the same time, it can make it really hard because, you know, you struggle with the same things. So if you have an emotionally dysregulated child and an emotionally dysregulated adult, occasionally it can be like.
I think a really nice thing that I always say is, you know, I get up every day and do my best. I might not always accomplish everything, but I know I'm prepared to tackle it. But you get up every day and you just go in with that, and I try my best, and that's all you can do.
Right. Moving on to a more controversial question. This comes up quite a lot in discussions we have around neurodiversity. In your opinion, is neurodiversity a superpower or not? H, do you want to go first?
Do I have to?
I could go to somebody else first.
Yeah, well, I'll have a little think about that one.
I'm not going to Vanessa first because I know her answer. Jean, have you got any
Sharon
thoughts?
found out the hard way that I have very, very strong opinions on this one.
I'm happy to go first if you want me to, Sharon.
Yeah, Jean, you go first.
So whilst I think emphasising the strengths that people have can be helpful and perhaps hugely positive in a recruitment type situation to kind of frame something in a more positive light, I do think we all can have a superpower if we are put in the right environment with the right support mechanisms, regardless whether we're neurodivergent, neurotypical, or any other label. And that's what we need to be aiming for. So we need to kind of create spaces and have management routines and so on, what allows everybody to flourish and use the best of their abilities. And some people will have a huge, I call it a spike, huge spike upwards in something, and other people just not. The whole lot will go up a little bit by that environment. So for me, I have a very deep spike downwards on a couple of things. In the right environment, it's much less noticeable. So, and I think that's where we're at. I mean, I always feel a bit uncomfortable when we start talking about superpower. And yeah, we know that there are some very brilliant scientists and things existing and in the past who have been shown or believed to be neurodivergent, but I'm not sure that that's always a good idea to address it in that way, perhaps.
Super. Amanda?
The short answer is no. However, like you say, there are strengths, and the strengths could be being sensitive, creative, impulsive, which can be quite fun, especially if you're about to do some online shopping. Or someone says, "Would you like to go somewhere?" Yeah, sure, I'll do it. So and being super focused on something that you're really interested in, you will give it, you know, your all, and you won't deviate. And I kind of tried to put that spin on my son when he was diagnosed a few years ago, and then I realized I was being a bit unfair to him because I was not validating then the challenges that I went through, and then I wasn't validating the fact that this is affecting his school, his relationships with family, with friends. And so that was really short-sighted of me and not sensitive of me. So the short answer is no, because it is really exhausting. You know, the moment you wake up, it's like here we go. And yeah, so I think before I spun it that way, I realized that that was a really bad thing to do. And I've worked on correcting that, but yeah, the answer is no, not at all. As I said earlier, if I had the opportunity to have it or not have it, definitely not have it.
Hey, do you want to go before we let Vanessa loose?
Yeah, I'm not too sure really. I do agree with what Amanda said, and I also do agree with where Jean came from. If we are with the right team and the right people on there, we all can be. I mean, for example, like myself, when I struggle, I have for example, a simple thing, replying back to an email. I can write an email. It'll take me about 20 minutes longer than anyone else. But then before I send it, I've got to get someone else to read it as well. And I've got this gentleman who sits next to me sometimes in the office, and I'll just pass it to him. I say, just read that, and he'll say, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Just send it. You're fine. You know. And so yeah, yes and no. I'm going to be on the fence on this one, I'm afraid.
That's all right. Vanessa's not going to be on the fence.
Vanessa is not going to be on the fence. No, this is one where the Vanessa directness / absolute bluntness comes to the fore, I'm afraid. I appreciate that. Everyone before me has been incredibly diplomatic, but no, it's not. It's a disability. It's a protected characteristic under the Equality Act, which basically by definition means that it has a long-term and significant impact on your daily life. And I totally understand why well-meaning people are trying to promote inclusion by saying that there is a superpower, you know, and they're trying to get employers to understand the benefits that a neurodivergent employee can bring to their organization when they're allowed to play to their skill sets. But it has this unintended backlash, if you like, that neurodivergent employees feel under pressure. And as we've already said, you know, there's already that feeling of not being good enough, you know, not being able to live up to the expectation, the shame we've mentioned. And all of a sudden, there's this pressure to somehow be superhuman, to have some kind of savant genius, to be able to be appreciated as an individual, you know, or maybe, you know, this amazing skill to churn through 4 times as much work as the average person who is just accepted for being that average person who's good at their job. And it's simply not the case, and it's not fair. You know, like 99.999% of the population, neurodivergent people are people. You know, we're good at some stuff, we're not good at other stuff. You know, if we're allowed to work to our strengths, we can be incredibly productive. And if we are not allowed to play to those strengths, it can have a massive detrimental impact. And, you know, we've already spoken about the fact that sometimes it's not even the skill sets that people appreciate, it's the way they perceive you as a person. And obviously that's where our challenges can sometimes kick in. And another thing, and I'm really sorry to rant, Sharon, but you knew this one was coming, right? It's kind of patronizing, right? It's kind of patronizing to say to someone, oh, you've got a superpower. It's a little bit like, you know, if someone has a visible disability, you know, a wheelchair user or something, you know, and someone turns around and goes, oh, you're just so inspiring. I don't know how you do it. You make me so, you know, ashamed that I'm not as good as you. You know, you're a superhero. And that person's like, no, I'm not. I'm just like a regular person, exactly like you. I just want to have the same opportunities as you, and I want to be appreciated for me and who I am. That is all I want. So, you know, if an individual, and I know you've said this before, you know, someone who actually personally identifies as having their neurodiversity as their superpower, that's fine. That's their choice. If they are advocating in the way that's great. But generically across the board, expecting or promoting this concept that to be valued as a neurodivergent employee, you somehow have to be superhuman. I think it's unintentional, but I do think it's detrimental, and it places a lot of unfair expectation on people who already have a fear of not measuring up.
Yeah, so you're sitting on the fence then, Vanessa?
Always, you know me, I always hold back, always diplomatic me, that's the thing.
Right, we're running out of time, and I know people have places to go. I like to end these because I'm very action orientated. I don't like to just talk about stuff. I want people to go away and action things. So quickly, because we're running out of time, what one action would you like everyone to do after leaving this webinar? Jean?
Oh, read the PAS if you haven't looked at it already. And hopefully that will be a catalyst to you thinking about other things that you could do in your workplace, or research you could get involved with, or some other activity to take this to the next step.
Super, brilliant. Amanda?
Keep engaging with the business, reduce those systemic barriers, keep advocating for community support around, neurodiverse. Yeah, just keep the conversation going, and also a bold, inclusive leadership to really help with that culture piece as well.
Yeah, that was more than one, Amanda, but you did say maths wasn't your strong part. Vanessa?
I would like everyone to go away and just think about one thing that they do in their organisation and really almost challenge themselves about whether it is a fair assessment of skills or a contribution or a value, and not just a communication perception thing.
Super. H?
Keep pushing it and talking about it on site. Let's try to get more people open up about it, talk about it. They don't have to hide it. There's so much help out there. Let's just get it out there. Let's get the conversation going.
Super, thanks H. And thank you to all our panelists. I think it's been a really fun conversation that we've had today about a serious issue. And yeah, just thanks for coming along and sharing your experience and knowledge. We will be having more Lunch and Learns in the Fortel series, so keep an eye out on Fortel's social media for the next one that's coming up. And yes, thanks for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.